And so it isn't that the Bible is true. It's that the Bible is the precondition for the manifestation of truth, which makes it way more true than just true.
Wow.
A whole different kind of true. And I think this is not only literally the case.
I gotta say, Joe Rogan might be the only person who's still gonna be sitting there and drinking that kind of Kool-Aid up. What the the Bible doesn't even have any references to the germ theory of disease because it wasn't known to humans at the time. I don't think it's an arbiter of truth. Peterson was a very frequent guest on Joe Rogan. But anyways, yesterday he tweeted this out. Off to see Rogan, at Joe Rogan. And I was like, this is the ventriloquist arc. It's quite a look you got going on here. But, you know, cool. Good stuff.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
If categories dissolve, especially fundamental ones, the culture is dissolving because the culture is a structure of category. Mm-hmm. That's what.
How does it look more ridiculous in person? I just took a lot of time out of, being a conductor at the Philharmonic Orchestra to be here. It's an absolute honor.
But it is. Right. So, and in fact, culture is a structure of category that we all share. So we see things the same way. Well, that's why we can talk. I mean, not exactly the same way, because then we'd have nothing to talk about. But roughly speaking, we have a bedrock of agreement.
Send it, Raven. I'll take a look at it.
That's the Bible, by the way. So I just walked through the Museum of the Bible in Washington. That was very cool. It's a very cool museum.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. That's the Bible, by the way?
Roughly speaking, we have a bedrock of agreement. That's the Bible, by the way. Mm. So I just walked through the Museum of the Bible in Washington. That was very cool. It's a very cool museum.
So the structure, that's what the Bible
Yeah, it's what
provides.
I figured out. I just figured this out this week. So it was a cool thing to walk through because it's chronological. They have one floor which is the history of the Bible. Mm. But it's not exactly that.
Thanks,
it's really what it is the history of the book. Now, in many ways, the first book was the Bible. I mean, literally, because at one point there was only one book. Like, as far as our Western culture is concerned, there was one book. And for a while, literally, there was only one book. And that book was the Bible. And then before it was the Bible, it was a...
Have you learned things? Has everyone learned some stuff? Are you learning now? Even though it's not technically correct, but still. I mean, people like to talk about it as the Holy Trinity. Because, of course, you start out with the Torah, and then you get the Bible, and then you get the New Testament, and then you get, well, I guess, it would be a quadrilogy, right? Because then comes the Quran, and they all build upon each other. So there's that as well. But literally the Bible, there was literally just one Bible.
It was scrolls and it was writings on papyrus, but we were starting to aggregate written text together, and it went through all sorts of technological transformations, and then it became books that everybody could buy, the book everybody could buy, and the first one of those was the Bible, and then it became all sorts of books that everybody could buy. But all the
Bible came before Gilgamesh got it.
Those books, in some sense, emerged out of that underlying book. And that book itself, the Bible isn't a book, it's a library. It's a collection of books. And so what I figured out was, partly because I was talking to my brother-in-law, Jim Keller, who's the world's greatest chip designer and has now designed a chip that's as powerful as the human brain, which is optimized for artificial intelligence learning.
Did you all just hear the sentence that came out of his mouth? Like, I'll look up this individual to find out what incredible microchip processing he's made. But the fact that we now have a chip that is as powerful as the human brain, that is astounding. I didn't know.
The world's greatest chip designer. And so what I figured out was, partly because I was talking to my brother-in-law, Jim Keller, who's the world's greatest chip designer and has now designed a chip that's as powerful as the human brain, which is optimized
Jim Killer, the engineer. I'm sure he's like incredibly brilliant. I didn't know. And again, I'm coming at this from, let's just say, a layman perspective. I'm a normie when it comes to this kind of stuff. The idea that we could have a microprocessor that is as powerful as the human mind already. James Killer, microprocessor engineer, best known for his work at AMD and Apple, was the lead architect of the AMD K8 microarchitecture, including the original Athlon 64. He's involved in designing the Athlon, the Apple processors. He's also the co-author of specifications for the x86 instruction set. I'll look up Jim Kelly brain chip. Or Jim Killer. Jim Killer brain microprocessor.
For artificial intelligence learning, by the way. And so I talked to him about that. He said, "You heard of the internet?" I said, "Yeah, Jim, I've heard of the internet." He said, "This is way more revolutionary than that." So in any case, we were talking about meaning in text because we were talking.
Oh, is he talking about the Bible? Oh, I get it.
Talking about translation and the problem of understanding text. And Jim said, the meaning of words is coded in the relationship of the words to one another. And the postmodernists make that case, that all meaning is derived from the relationship between words. That's wrong because, well, what about rage? That's not words. And what about moving your hand? That's not words. So it's wrong, but part of it's right because the meaning we derive from the verbal domain is encoded in the relationship between words. So now then you think, well, let's think about the relationship between words. Well, some words are dependent on other words. Some ideas are dependent on other ideas. The more ideas are dependent on a given idea, the more fundamental that idea is. That's a definition of fundamental. So now imagine you have an aggregation of texts in a civilization. You say, which are the fundamental texts? And the answer is the texts upon which most other texts depend. And so you'd put Shakespeare way in there in English because so many texts are dependent on Shakespeare's literary revelations. And Milton would be in that category, and Dante would be in that category, at least in translation. Fundamental authors, part of the Western canon, not because of the arbitrary dictates of power, but because those texts influenced more other texts. And then you think about that as a hierarchy, okay?
There's a lot of reasons, and a lot of them historical, as to why those are more popular texts than others, though. I mean, if you would ignore that alone and say that it is actually the words within the texts that lent their credibility, like, is he basically ramping up to the greatest selling book in human history is the Bible, which is technically true. I mean, you'll find it in every single hotel around the world. I think that's probably it. The power of the words itself within the Bible were capable of spreading it further than anything else. Then we'll just skip over things like the Crusades.
The Bible at its base, which is certainly the case.
I got a
now
COVID
imagine that's
stimmy
the
from
entire
my tribe and can afford things again. Thanks for everything you do, Lance.
Oh, thanks, Gray. I appreciate it. You got a COVID stimmy from my tribe and I can afford things again. Thank you so much, Gray. I really appreciate that.
entire corpus of linguistic production, all things considered. Now, how do you understand that? Like, literally, how do you understand that? The answer is you sample it by reading and listening to stories and listening to people talk. You sample that whole domain. You build a low-resolution representation of that inside you, and then you listen and see through that. And so it isn't that the Bible is true. It's that the Bible is the precondition for the manifestation of truth, which makes it way more true than just true.
Wow.
A whole different kind of true. And I think this is not only literally the case.
I gotta say, Joe Rogan might be the only person who's still gonna be sitting there and drinking that kind of Kool-Aid up. What the fuck? The Bible doesn't even have any references to the germ theory of disease because it wasn't known to humans at the time. I don't think it's an arbiter of truth. Or the originator of truth. Because again, if you were to take in information, as all humans do, and we process them and we prioritize information, usually around the hypothalamus is what you will prioritize whether or not we are going to condition ourselves in order to take in certain different kinds of stimuli, because otherwise we would be overstimulated by everything that came into us, and we were to take that and then relocate what we were thinking about, process it, and then of course we can then realize that the Bible, of course, itself is not about truth, but the originator of truth itself. Ergo vis-a-vis.
Factually, I think it can't be any other way. It's the only way we can solve the problem of perception.
Wow. Jordan Peterson on Joker? Yes. Yes.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
I just watched Joaquin Phoenix in Joker,
Joaquin.
and he's a very charismatic actor. And
He
I
is.
was thinking, oh God, because
I agree with Jordan Peterson on this.
he carried that whole movie on single-handedly. It's a dark, dark movie, and it has to do with resentment. This man who was forced to be nice by his mother,
Yeah.
who turns out to be absolutely crazy. And
Did you feel seen, Jordan? Here, an incredible tale, the manifestation of this uncouth mother, rather dragon of chaos energy coming off her, and he refuses to brush her with the pubis brush that he had to build, as all children have to.
him like mad when he was a kid. And then he becomes this role model for the dissemination of complete catastrophe into the entire society. It's a story of Cain in part. But Phoenix really carries that. And part of the reason that he does that is because he creates a compelling character who's sympathetic. Like, you can be sympathetic to him because he really did have a hard life, like really hard. But Phoenix is an extraordinarily charismatic person, partly because he's so unbelievably, he's masculine in his features. And carved.
Yes, of course. Bring it to me. But I'm gonna guess his gestures were feminine, right? His motion was he was fluidly feminine, while at the same time remaining a masculine archetype. Something to this effect.
But he's so graceful. Every single thing he does in the entire movie is a dance. Like, he's conscious of every single movement he makes. Every turn of his head is conscious. It's dance-like, and you can't take your eyes off it. And a lot of stellar performers had that ability to integrate, male performers had that ability to integrate that feminine grace into their masculine character.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
What is it like to be you? Like, what is it like to, and then I know, you've gone through a lot of shit. And this latest thing with getting off of the benzodiazepine, that to me was a real shocker. Because, first of all, I had no idea that you were taking it. And then to find out that it's that difficult to get off of, and then to hear from other people that have tried to get off of it how difficult it is. And then to realize how many people around me have an issue with that stuff. Xanax is a motherfucker. And I didn't know what a motherfucker it was until I talked to a friend who is a counselor at a drug rehab center, where he was saying that that is one of the ways that people get locked back into drinking and doing drugs, is a psychiatrist will prescribe Xanax. And sober people who get on Xanax all of a sudden start drinking. He said it's super common. He said that it's one of the most difficult drugs to get off of. He said, and this is something that Dr. Carl Hart, who's I love him to death. He's brilliant. He speaks so openly and honestly about drugs, and guys.
Raven says, I don't understand why people want to dogpile on Jordan Peterson because of his benzo addiction. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I've always tried to come at it from the angle that, like, as someone who's dealt with a lot of tragedy in my life from people suffering from addiction, it's not the addiction itself that you should be targeting. It's the hypocrisy of someone who has been trying to sell a mantra to young men, especially, that the control over their lives is single-handedly within themselves, and that if they clean up their rooms, if they get their lives in order, bucko, if they do all that, then they can achieve anything they want, right? It's completely within your grasp. If you're a failure in life, that's 100% of your own doing. You are choosing to be a failure, but you could choose to be a success. Anyone can choose to be an Elon Musk. Anyone can choose to be a Jack Dorsey. Anyone can choose to be a Mark Zuckerberg. It's up to you. You have to make that choice, and it's within you and you alone. No other societal or systemic racism, historical racism, any of that. None of those play factors. It's all upon you, bucko. So come on. That's one of the reasons why he's one of the people right now making a whole bunch of rage tweets about the possibility of Idris Elba being Bond. Like, that's the weird thing that he's doing right now. And again, it's like, why does the fictional British character spy guy being played by this super ruggedly handsome British person, whose only difference between him and every Bond that's come before him is the fact that he's black, upset you so much? And you'll get the weird people coming out of the woodwork being like, well, you wouldn't get like a white person to play like Martin Luther King, and then you can be like, well, yes, but Martin Luther King is a real historical figure. James Bond is a fictional character that was invented. I think you're going to be okay if one Bond isn't white.
professor at Columbia. He said that there's 2 drugs that will kill you when you get off of them. He goes, it's
I've been prescribed benzo since '07, but I fucking hate Rogan's bullshit. There's no question that like things like Xanax and benzos can be extremely addictive. That's entirely true, and there's a huge problem in the United States of people being overprescribed medication, being improperly prescribed medication, stuff of that nature. I don't take any joy in thinking that Jordan Peterson's. I think the story is that his wife was actually like dying from, or she wasn't dying, but she contracted cancer, some form of cancer, and that added to everything else was one of the reasons why he was taking it. Like all of that is just like horrifyingly tragic. What's fucked up is, again, it's coming from the guy who's made his entire career around either A, lying about issues. A lot of the transphobia comes from him just making shit up that isn't there, talking about compelled speech, I have to use Z and zero, oh my god. Just that mentality that pick yourself up from your bootstraps. Like if you watch some Jordan Peterson videos on addiction, it's kind of someone who's consistently prescribing that people in their lives take their own lives into their own hands. And then the fact that his story involves him going to Russia to go into a medically induced coma was something that probably would not have been permissible. I assume, I'm not a doctor in the United States, but something that probably wouldn't have been permissible in the United States, which is one of the reasons why he got that treatment done in Russia, is obviously a pretty messed up story.
alcohol and benzodiazepine. Those are the 2 that if you just quit, you'll fucking die.
Or you wish you would.
Meanwhile, they're handing those things out like Tic Tacs.
Yeah. Well, they were regarded as a safe substitute for barbiturates. And you could easily overdose on barbiturates, especially with alcohol.
Well, when did they know? When was it in the literature, the difficulty of detoxing yourself from these?
Very recently.
Really?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And when did they start being handed out?
20 years ago.
Fuck.
More.
So what happened? People just stayed on them?
Often.
I have one good friend that takes it every day and takes it oftentimes with alcohol, which I know you're absolutely not supposed to do. There's not a damn thing I can do about it. This is a friend that I love to death.
And like honestly, it's one of those things that like it really upsets me that these are the people with giant megaphones to talk about this topic, because addiction is a really difficult thing to talk about, and I found a lot of people have incredibly bad yikesy takes, and it's often along the sense of like everyone has agency. So in the event of addicts, why don't they fix their lives? Why don't they stop? Why are they doing this? Like, I've had family members who steal from their own parents, who steal from every single person they love just to get another fix, like just to get another opiate. Like the addictions can become so powerful and all-consuming that it's literally the only thing that an addict will think about. It's like from the moment they wake up until they're high, or when they're not high, they're thinking about being high. Like that's it. That's how the entirety of their world starts to circulate. It's not as if it's something where like every single one of them is always consistently being like, well, I could stop being vilified by society. I could stop living on the streets. I could stop being disowned by my friends and family and everyone that I've ever loved. I could, get custody of my children back. I could do all those any given day, but I'm choosing not to today. Today is just another day that I'm going to be an addict because, I'm weaker than the rest of you. If I was strong like the rest of you, I would, decide to stop doing these things that are making me ostracized by society as a whole and, my friends and family. But again, this is just the way it's going to be.
And I put my hands up and I go, there's nothing I can do. And he's been on it for more than 10 years.
Yeah, well, I started taking them because I was ill.
Yeah.
And they helped.
But that was like, and they don't really like to mention, the role that big pharma plays in all this, especially when it comes to the opioid addiction. When you have a corporation that is incentivizing doctors to start prescribing to their patients things like opioids, specifically for things like broken bones and stuff of that nature, where all of a sudden it's like, well, you know what, you can take an Oxycontin, you won't feel any pain, you'll feel wonderful, and then after a week or so, you stop taking it, and then you just go about your day and your bones are all healed up. And then it turns out that like these things are incredibly addictive. After people, like once people start taking them, they start to get this, it actually fools your brain, and your own inner monologue starts to think things like, well, I felt very, very healthy and very good when I was on that pill, so I should probably go seek that pill out and take it again, because it does make my body feel very good. So why not continue to do that? And then the doctor doesn't want to prescribe me opioids anymore, so I guess I will have to seek them out in another way. Do people on the street sell such products?
Because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep at all. I don't know. I still really don't know what happened.
You couldn't.
It's because benzos affect. I think it's called the GABA system. And talk to a pharmacist about this. They know way more than I do. But yeah, it can directly affect the sleep patterns of people.
Sleep, and so an anti-anxiety medication. Do you think that this is one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about? This is why I brought up the fame thing. How much of the pressure.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-prescription drugs, okay? There's other people I know who are alive today because of being on a very specific combination of medication, all right? There's people who may need it because they are bipolar. There's people who may need it because they're schizophrenic. I'm not saying that I'm against medication. I am against the incentivization to prescribe things to people for the profit motive that is being done and has been done in the past that leads to things like the opioid crisis.
Of being attacked by all these different people and having these people write these horrible articles about you. And I know you read that stuff, which is different from me. I don't read stuff about me. And I think that's helped me tremendously. And that, like, my gauge of how...
I mean, I got to agree with Joe there. Point to Joe Rogan. That's very healthy online practice.
I deal with people is, like I said...
Tucker Carlson doesn't read things about him either.
You can tell. You can tell by the way he communicates.
Maybe Tucker should. Maybe Tucker should take some criticism.
Carry around when they read things about themselves. Like Eric Weinstein has that burden sometimes. You know, when people read.
Yeah, well, part of the reason. So, did I read things about me? Well, yeah, but that wasn't what was stressful exactly. Although it was.
Ramsey says it's very similar to alcohol. Your brain stops producing its own GABA, which leads to serious problems. Ah, gotcha.
But
what was stressful when I first I've had a history of depression, and that runs in my family, and that's probably stems back for me right to the time when I was a kid. And I think when I really got sick in 2016, it was partly a manifestation of that. But at the time, my job was threatened, like actually.
Right. Yeah.
And my clinical practice was threatened. And the Canadian Revenue Agency was after me all at the same time. And they were after me because of a mistake they had made, which they admitted 3 months later. And the college was after me because of a vindictive client who came after me with a pack of lies, but because they were so... And basically I emerged from that unscathed, but that was by no means obvious that that was going to be the case. I was accused of sexual misconduct. And the evidence? When I was dealing with this client, I would turn my wedding ring around.
You'd spin it?
Well, I play with it.
Right. And that was sexual misconduct?
Yeah, well, to her it was a signal of some dark underlying desire that that was polluting our therapeutic relationship.
I've been doing that with you the whole conversation.
Yeah.
I have this silicone wedding ring.
Yeah, well, I'm going to report. I'd report you if you had
in there.
Yeah, exactly.
I do that all the time.
Yes, well, there you go.
Bad?
It's really bad. And if there was a college that governed the behavior of reprobates like you, I would definitely report. No, don't do that. That's terrible.
I stretch it out.
No, that's it's Freudian to the extreme. Although I don't know what turning.
So weird. Why is that Freudian? It's like, reminded me of the cock ring. Like, what?
It means.
How could stretching a silicone wedding band be Freudian?
Well, you're putting your finger.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's a very weird thing to say. Oh God, Freudian.
It's rubber. Fuck kind of.
This is so awkward. Oh, you know, it's a hole. Putting a finger in a hole.
Rubber is, that's good. Anyways, we don't have to go there.
So that was all you had done was play with your wedding ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that.
And I really helped her a lot. Like,
Well, so unfortunately, when you're dealing with people that are extremely troubled, oftentimes they look for external reasons why they're troubled.
Fellas, is it gay to play with your rings on your hands? Is it? Does it remind you of hole? Is that going to be the new? Is that the new discourse? Are we starting that one up?
And they find oppressors.
well, she was also angry with me because when all this blew up around me, it interfered with my clinical practice, and she had come to rely on our weekly meetings.
Oh,
and
you
so
had to disrupt them.
she was angry about being abandoned, and it was really sad because I didn't want to abandon my clients, but
That's the
I
third
had to
hole.
stop
We
my
discovered
clinical
it.
practice, which was also very upsetting.
The fabled
to me, 'cause
third
I had
hole.
like 20 clients, and I knew these people, man. Like they were,
Right.
I knew these people.
Yeah.
You know, I'd followed them through thick and thin. And then all of a sudden, so many things piled up around me that I found when I was in a clinical session that I was distracted.
So
Well, you can't be distracted in a clinical session.
right.
And so, anyways, what emerged from that, and it was in the middle of the winter, and I have seasonal affective disorder, I couldn't sleep and at all for quite a long time. And I went to my doctor and I said, I can't sleep. And he gave me a sleeping medication and an anti-anxiety drug. And I took a little bit of the anti-anxiety drug and I could sleep. And my life was pretty stressful. And I thought, okay, I'm much better. I'm just going to leave this be. This is working. I'm not going to muck with it because I could barely go back to work.
And what was it? A low dose
Yeah. I couldn't even
of
feel it.
Xanax? Really?
Yeah, it was a low dose.
So it alleviated the anxiety, but it didn't affect your cognitive performance, or it didn't affect the way.
Well, it didn't affect it as much as how sick I was. Like that really affected it.
So sick meaning
Oh,
depressed.
No,
you mean
no.
When
no,
you say
no,
you're
it was-
sick.
No. When it hit, if I stood up, my blood pressure was really low. If I stood up, I'd faint. I was fainting
When-
5 or
when-
6 times a day.
When are we talking about here?
2016.
Okay, so this was when.
I'm always so anti-armchair doctors, but like that could have something to do with the all meat only diet. That could be responsible for like the faints if the only thing you've been eating is meat and salt for like a solid year straight and water. I mean, I know that's probably not the healthiest mix.
All the pressure from all these different sources was coming at you,
Yeah.
and that was making you sick. So it was
No,
physically.
yeah, that was part of it. I think what it did was it stressed me enough so that I was more susceptible to whatever was wrong with me in the first place.
So there was
'Cause I've had a
something-
lot of immunological problems.
How long did it take you to recover from the benzos?
Well, when I finally 2 years. And I haven't fully recovered, but
You haven't
also
fully
I was
recovered?
also sick. No, my left hand is quite numb, and was way more numb. Both hands of my feet were like completely numb, and I was in like excruciating pain for 2 years, like pain at levels that I didn't even know was possible.
All the time, or
No,
on occasion?
No, this is one of the things that was terrible about it, is that it was really, really bad in the morning.
And what did it start right after you got off of the Xanax?
No, but it got way worse.
So it just started showing up eventually,
Yeah.
and then
It started to get worse about the same time that Tammy went into the hospital, but because she was fighting her way through, catastrophic cancer at the same time when this started to happen.
So this was additional.
Yeah,
stress.
that was the part I knew about. But yeah, I agree with you, Purple Keyblade here. Like, it's wild to me he doesn't extend this compassion to other addicts or mentally ill. Instead, it's just clean up your room. That's kind of always been my criticism of Peterson. Even like, yeah, I mean, this is obviously it's a really sad story. It sounds like either he is not finding the medical attention he needs, whoever he's talking to is not actually meeting the things. Like, I'm not in any way near to like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. I have no idea what is going on. I don't know why your arms are numb or what is causing that, and all these kind of problems. But it sounds like you're not getting treated in the way that you should be by health professionals. And again, like, an addiction to benzos is no joke. It's any addiction isn't, and like, it really sucks because the way that this should be approached is not like, all these addicts, they're all degenerates, and they're making poor life decisions, and if they could only, clean up the room and fix themselves, this wouldn't be a problem in society anymore. And I mean, you got to put into perspective too the difference in class here, right? Like you have an incredibly wealthy, super famous celebrity, Jordan Peterson, has access to the best possible doctors, the best possible psychiatrists in all this respect. And then a lot of people who may be, just watching Jordan Peterson clips on YouTube or even like reading his books or stuff like that. And being taught this mentality where it is like, you will single-handedly be responsible for the entirety of all the decisions that you make in your life, and every single outside or externality does not play the same role as you yourself as this addict should be able to do to get yourself out of it. JP goes so hard on the medical issues. I recognize people have different feelings, but JP does ask the same thing I do with my family when they ask about depression. I oversell the pain and the lack of sleep so they get on a big stage and talk honestly about the depression. Yeah. Benzos really mess with your brain. The whole fainting thing, that's things that happen from the objectification of the illness caused by addiction. Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's just like Vulpes puts it well. It's individual responsibility for thee, but not for me, is kind of what it sounds like. At least we know that the Joker is feminine now. That's important. That's what I wanted to learn about.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form. Available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we beseech thee to smite down our enemies. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble court jesters, here to amuse you. To our lords, Trevor R., we give thanks for this spit of land for us to eke out this meager existence. To our knights, Merid, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Ellie Leslie, Alex P., Brandon, Words Greenwood, Nate, that one guy, Hagbird Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Val 9000, Jenna Tall, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevor Yanis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojak, Saren 42, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Nkosin, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our flag in a veil, and we salute you, our friends.